already are. Like whoever's watching this video is hearing me say, hey, we're already live. And watch it later. Now, I don't know what's going on kind of thing. So pretty cool, if you ask me. But yeah. All right, so we can go ahead and get started as soon as this decides to cooperate here. All right, so the question was, what are the 3 things you need to be classified as a state? Raise your hand, give me one of them. Yes. That's not the answer. Power. You do have to have power. That's sovereignty, right? And let's go in the back. And a place or territory. Territory. All right. And that is where we're going to pick up today. But what I do want to hear is, what do you think is the most important? All right. So which one of those do you think is the most important and why? I see a hand there. Go ahead. Right. Or even if you could, would there really be a reason to? Like, it would just be you and you can just do whatever you wanted in the first place. Right. So there wouldn't even be a real reason to govern without it. So good job. Anybody have anything different than population? Yeah. Okay, so you need a place, you need a territory, and the reason she brought this up, I'm glad you did, is the same reason that we can't declare war on ISIS. Remember, because they have power and they have people that support them, but they do not have recognized borders by us, right? By us, I mean like the United States. So us, recognized borders, we don't have them. Anybody say sovereignty? Anybody say power? No, you got to pick one. What's the most important of the 3? You pick. Okay, why power? I got you. I got you. So you have people and you have a place, but if you can't make them listen to you or do what you want them to do, what good is having this state? This would be a good example of like civil wars, right? This is sort of like what's going on in Syria now, not ISIS, but Syria, where their government doesn't really have full control over their citizens, right? So they have territory and they have people, but they don't necessarily have the power to make the people do what they want them to do. And they're trying to exercise it through force, right? Using chemical weapons, but we're trying to prevent that, all right? So sovereignty, again, is power. This is that third part here. Having sovereignty allows the state to have supreme authority within those borders. So basically, in theory, this means that nobody can tell any state what to do when what is occurring happens within their own border. So think about it like this. What if a country went to another country and said, hey, you have to help us build a wall in our country and you have to help us pay for it? What would that country say? You're a moron. And you have absolutely, positively zero authority in any way, shape, or form to make us do, say, think, or even consider anything, because that is our territory and our sovereignty, and you have no power in any way within our territory. Yes. I'm speaking hypothetically, of course, but yes, this does pertain. This is exactly why Mexico has not agreed to pay for the wall, because it's not in their state. So they could just say no, and then there's nothing we can do about it, right? Same thing. They couldn't want to build a wall. Mexico couldn't say, hey, let's build a wall and make America pay for it. We would say, you're stupid. We're not paying for that. It's your wall and it's in your territory. You do it, right? So that's exactly what Mexico has said to us. So that would be it. It's the same thing as, like, we couldn't go into Syria and say, hey, you can't use chemical weapons against your citizens, because that happened within their border and they have sovereignty and we can't stop it, right? But we can send money and guns to the rebels to help kind of fight this cause, right? So even though this theoretically is the case, this is not always the case, right? So power in and of itself isn't enough. You have to be able to keep and maintain that power, or it doesn't do you any good. It doesn't help, right? So you can also influence other states to do certain things. We're going to talk about this later when we get to economics, but I'm going to tell you a little story about the Asian contagion. For those of you that have never heard of this, basically the United States sent an economist to various Asian countries, right? Thailand being the one that fell the hardest. And here's what they did. They went in and said, hey, you have a bunch of potential to build this oil pipeline. It's going to be incredible. And it's going to create this many jobs, and it's going to make you this much money. All you have to do is pay to build it. Well, these countries at the time were communist countries. So what was required was the government were the ones that sort of controlled the banks, right? So what would happen is they would have foreign investors, Americans, give a bunch of money to the government, and the government would give those loans to businesses to build this pipeline. Problem is the economists undercut what it would cost. And they basically told them it would cost this much when in all reality it would cost twice as much. So what happens? They ran out of money. And who did they have to ask for more? The government. And the government didn't have any money, so who did they ask? The investors, the United States investors. So they gave them more money, and they let them build like 90% of this oil pipeline. And then the investors all of a sudden said, hey, you don't get any more money. And the government couldn't give any money to the banks, who gave the money to the businesses. So what happened? The businesses went bankrupt, the banks collapsed, and the government went broke. And the United States said, hey, we're nice guys. Here's a bunch of money to bail you out. But in exchange, we get full control over the existing pipeline. You still have to pay us back the loans that you already took out. You have to become a capitalist country and allow us to invest directly in business. So basically what happened is we got them to pay us to build 90% of our own pipeline. We finished the last 10% and then brought in a bunch of American workers to run it. So it brought 0 jobs, cost them tens of millions of dollars, and we made a killing, right? We did this multiple times. It was the entire collapse of the Asian region. It's what took China and Japan and both Koreas, South Korea in particular, so long to develop as compared to the United States, because we crippled all the Asian economies so they couldn't sell to anybody, right? There's a whole book about it. It's called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, if you're interested in it. Awesome. If you're a reader, it's really is a good read. Keeps you captivated the whole time. All right. So what this is, where did our state come from? Where did the idea that we needed a government come from, right? People, power, and place. Where did it start? A lot of scholars believe that it started with the evolutionary theory. So basically what this means is the head of the primitive family served as the government. All right. So how many of you have a person in your family? It could be a mom or a dad, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, something that is pretty much the person that makes the decisions. They are the person who decides where you have your family outings. They're the person that sort of says yes or no. All right. Anybody want to share who that is in their family? Go ahead. All right, your grandma. So that would be considered a matriarch, the person who sort of leads the family, right? And everybody else sort of defers to her. Does that make sense? Right? When decisions need to be made about whatever, time and place of dinners, that kind of thing, okay? So what would happen if your grandmother, hopefully not, were to go away, were to pass? Who would be in charge next? Your mom. And that is your grandmother's daughter. Okay. So basically, the reason I bring that up is because all of you have this in your head. You have the person who's in charge, but you also who's going to be next in charge, right? That's what the evolutionary theory is. It's two people got together and had a family, all right? One of those two people is the leader of the family, right? Whether it's overtly with yelling and screaming or subliminally with passive aggressiveness or just calm power, if that makes sense. Okay? And what happens is they have their family and the family grows and they sort of shape and guide them. But one of them goes away, another person steps up and becomes the leader. All right? And there are lessers too. So like your grandma's the matriarch of your family, but your mom sounds like she's the leader of the smaller immediate family. And then you even have leaders among your siblings if you have siblings, right? And then there's a cousin that's a leader, right? And then there's a leader among your aunts and uncles, which also could be your parent, right? So it gets smaller and smaller, if you all know what I'm talking about, right? So my grandmother's also the matriarch of our family. When she passes, my dad will definitely be the person who sort of steps in it and does those things, right? So that's where the evolutionary comes from. It's basically the family, and it got passed down. Now the force theory is a little more cynical, I guess, right? Some scholars believe that government emerged when people in an area were brought under the authority of one person or a group as means of protection. Okay, so let's talk about this more realistically. Okay, on this side of the room there are 6 people, 2, 4, 6, right? Now let's say these 6 people are living their life, having fun. And then these middle desks, there are 9 of them, decide, we want everything that you have. We want it all. Right? You've got a couple options, right? What can you do? Number 1, you could fight them, right? And probably what would happen? Most likely, they would lose because they outnumber you by 33%. 33.3 if you care about decimals, right? Hold on, we're getting there. So these 9 would outpower you 6. So what's your second option? Check out this side of the room. You got 9 people over there, right? So what you can do is say, hey, 9 people over there, let's join together and make one tribe. And in exchange for us giving up power to you and protecting us, we will give up some of our power to you. We will defer to you. All right. So basically, you were forced to go under the authority of someone else under the fear of imminent attack or death by these 9 people. So what would happen? They would create a big 15-person village. 15's more than 9. So then these guys say, hey, these guys tried to attack us. Let's go get them, right? So then you 9 would go find another group that outnumbers them, and so on and so on and so on. And you would continue building huge numbers until finally you felt safe enough to where everybody could coexist. Sort of like a mutually assured destruction, kind of what's going on right now in the world, right? The United States isn't conglomerating more land because we've got enough and we can stop people, no matter who it is. Russia, same thing. Sure. Yeah, they're allies. Sure. Who would the United States bring? Puerto Rico is a part of the United States already. They're a protectorate. They're the same as Guam in the Dominican Republic. Not Cuba. Cuba is a communist country. They're actually the opposite of a part of the United States. They don't like us. We didn't hate them at one point, but then they got with Russia and supposedly put a nuclear weapon there, which is only like 86 miles from Florida. So I'm not going to help you. All right. Next theory was the divine right theory. This is the one that sort of always amazes me that this is a theory and that people accept it. And we're like, yeah, that sounds cool. The notion that a God or gods has chosen certain people to rule by divine right. So I want you to think about it this way. Some dude comes running into this school and says, God said, I'm in charge. Listen to me. What would all of you do? You would call 911 and say there's some crazy lunatic running around in this school right now. All right? How many of you would even begin to remotely accept this guy as a relative authority figure in any way, shape, or form? Yeah. If you have your hand in the air, I could also ask who's a liar, and then the same people would raise their hands. Yeah, you are. In this case, you are, yes. So for some reason, though, years passed, generations passed, civilizations passed, accepted this. And they said, okay, that's cool. That's fine with me. Right? We don't do that anymore because it's dumb. Yes, good. Nice, everybody. Okay. The next theory is a social contract theory. We talked about this a little bit when we started talking about Hobbes. But basically, his idea was that people didn't want to die. People enjoyed being alive. So Hobbes said people gave up certain rights in exchange for protection, right? So this is different from the force theory, because the force theory is you're being attacked, you have to team up, you have no other choice. The social contract theory is pretty mutual. It's like, we're good, but you know what? Maybe we can offer each other a little more protection if we sort of get together, and then among us we'll elect a leader and those people will protect us. In exchange for that, we have to follow their rules. Here in the United States, don't murder, don't smoke weed, right? Don't jaywalk, whatever it may be. All right. So social contract theory is pretty self-explanatory. You give up your power in exchange for protection. John Locke, however, basically went full America on it and said, you know what? If the government sucks, let's kill them. Yes. 1941, it was declared illegal by the federal government in the United States. It was you don't need to look it up because I know the exact story. The exact story is this: they believed that African-American men participating in the smoking of marijuana were preying on white women who were at risk, because everybody knows that African Americans use marijuana and that makes them some sort of danger to people who have different color skin, or you know what I mean? So basically, the origin of the law was created on a fallacy, on some sort of ridiculous assumption of the time, and has continued to exist until then. So in order to get that to happen, they had to release a bunch of propaganda about the use of marijuana and the dangers that pertain to it. But to this date, there have been exactly 0 deaths that are directly attributed to marijuana. Now, this does not include like driving under the influence, which is pretty dangerous if you've used THC. This does not include it. It's strictly from like alcohol overdoses happen all the time, and people die constantly from those. Strictly from drinking too much alcohol. You can't die from smoking too much weed. You just can't. Just not a thing. But it's illegal. And if you get caught with it, you forfeit any right you ever had to getting student loans. So unless you can pay cash for college, or unless you can pay cash for any training you want to do past high school, you can't get loans. They are blocked if you have a drug conviction. So keep that in mind moving forward. Well, people. It was founded in racism, but the law itself now isn't a racist law because it doesn't discriminate against one color or another. But I guess what you're saying, and my answer to your question would be this: there's a lot of propaganda around it that still goes around today, that people think marijuana is really bad for you and blah, blah, blah. And it's not good for you. It's just not any worse than like drinking alcohol or anything like that, right? Okay, I'm going to go to him first. Think about it this way. How many prisons would have to close? A ton. How many police officers will we need? Probably less. So, and I'm just speaking my opinion here. This is not fact, but in my opinion, the amount of people that would lose their jobs based on the closing of prisons and the laying off of police officers influences whether or not it's legal or illegal. So what I mean by that is no federal government or president wants to basically repeal a law that is going to make unemployment rise, which is a typical marker of a successful presidency or not. Okay, you're not asking any more questions. You're saying the same thing like 4 times in a row. You keep saying it's not bad, I don't understand why it's illegal, and then you say it like 4 different times. And you're about to tell me a story about your uncle who was like, oh, see, it wasn't that bad. And I get that and I understand that, but you got to do something different. We've got to move and like progress somewhere. Hagrid. Right. Rumored, yes, of course. Right, not white people. White people would never do anything bad. I was speaking sarcastically. If you're watching the video, you can't see my hand motions, but I was being sarcastic. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of presidents and people that are in charge of the executive branch of whatever level government use it as a means to sort of bring in people for crimes that they suspect them of committing as an association. Last question. Police job, law enforcement jobs. Oh. Okay, so I'll explain this very quickly. Yes, but it would take years for that to come back. So the executive branch and the person who would be enforcing that and the legislative branch who would pass that law would have to deal with the questions of unemployment for X number of years before it would happen. So here in Ohio, we had a law back in 2015, I think, is when it was on the ballot, where we could have legalized recreational and medicinal marijuana on the ballot. However, it created a monopoly. So basically, there were 6 people who formed one company, and that one company would be the only people allowed to grow it. They would be the only people that would be allowed to produce it. They were the only people that were allowed to sell it. So basically, you as a citizen couldn't start a business in that industry in any way because of what this monopoly created under this law. So the citizens of Ohio voted it down, which was very interesting because 63% of them supported the legalization of recreational marijuana, but it still got voted down because it created this monopoly. And if you're wondering how I voted against it because I told you my core belief is that you get to believe and do whatever it is that you want to do, whether I agree with it or not. And I think that as an American citizen, you should have the right to participate in any business that you think can make a profit, because that is the essence of capitalism. And I don't think anybody should be blocked because of a vote or because of the government creating a monopoly and saying this is okay. It just shouldn't happen. So what would happen is if they decriminalized it, it's still not legal in the state of Ohio. So you couldn't just start selling it. The government would have to come in and regulate it, right? So they would have to tax it. They would have to do all kinds of things, right? So they repeal one law, but they'd have to make 40 in order to keep it in place and deal with the questions of unemployment during the time being. And they don't want to do that. It's easier for them to just keep the unemployment where it's at because it is going to balance out. You're right. But it's in the meantime, they don't have any problems to deal with and they can focus on other things. Save your question. Hurry up. All right, come back. We'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. All right. So basically, to tie this all together, if it helps you at all, John Locke would say, if he would believe this, that the fact that marijuana is illegal breaks the social contract, right? One may think that it is ridiculous that I am giving up the right to participate in something like this for power in the government. So Locke would say, overthrow that government, or in our case, petition to get that law changed, participate in protests, sign those petitions, get it on the ballot, be a citizen that's active if you truly care about it, because that is your right. Now, this overthrow the government part only speaks to like huge stuff, like actually overthrowing the government, but which is weird. You can't do it violently in the United States. But if you're trying to overthrow the government, I doubt you care whether or not you're following the Constitution and not doing it violently. All right, but this is the idea we used in the American Revolution. We were being taxed and we didn't have a say-so. So we said, you know what? Screw you. Let's go. Let's fight it out. All right. So pretty cool. All right. Purposes of government. Why does government exist? A couple main ideas up there on the board. But the first thing we're going to talk about here are these. Government has the authority to require individuals to obey what they say, and then punish you if you don't do what they say. All right? And here's the big one. Governments derive their authority from legitimacy or their ability to force you to follow their laws. So what I mean by that is, here in the United States, you don't constantly feel threatened that you're going to be killed by the government for doing whatever it is. If you do, odds are there's something we need to talk about, right? Because either you're participating in certain behaviors or we need to talk. All right? I didn't hear you. What'd you say? You think the government's going to kill you? Okay. Yeah, I don't think so. You're not a person of color, so your odds are significantly less. All right? So, has all the authority. So basically, either you agree and say, yes, I understand why this is the law. It may be dumb and it may be stupid, but I get it. It is the law, and for the most part, everything's okay. Or the government makes totally, completely, and utterly ridiculous laws, but has so much power, so much force that you follow them anyways because you don't want to die. Okay? Now, here's the big difference, and I'm going to talk about something that's a little controversial, so hold on to your hats, folks, okay? In my opinion, these are basically the difference between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. Here's the difference right now, okay? Because here are the All Lives Matter people at the very top. Everybody's life matters. Of course, everybody's lives matter. That's not what the Black Lives Matter movement is even about, okay? That's not what it's saying. It's not saying Black Lives Matter more than any other lives, right? So basically, the All Lives Matter people are saying the government is pretty even. It treats everybody equally, right? The Black Lives Matter are saying not everyone is being treated equally, that all lives matter, but in particular, Black lives are being targeted at a higher rate or being treated differently under instances of the law. So the Black Lives Matter group is also saying that all lives matter. That is also one of their aims and goals, but saying, hey, we need some help to sort of change the opinion, right? There's been psychological research studies that some of my students may participate in, my first period classes, that show that just based on the color of your skin determines whether or not you get the police called on you for walking down the sidewalk a certain number of times. So if you walk past the same store 10 times and you're a person of color, you are 3 times more likely to have the police called on you. That's a ton, right? So here's the difference. Black Lives Matter is saying they're using force to force us to do things that they aren't using the force to make others do, simply based on the color of their skin. All right? So whether you believe all lives matter or Black Lives Matter, just understand that both groups do believe that all lives matter. They're just asking for help. They're asking for you to sort of reach out and help them out, okay? And if you don't believe they need the help, it's your belief. That's fine. We're still good. That's fine. All right? Any questions over this stuff? This is where we're going to end for today. Be ready for your questions tomorrow.